Hello, hello. Well, first and foremost, I want to make sure everyone hears me. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good, good. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to another episode of Live with Metamona. Well, I am your host, Metamona, and as always, here to bring you the most exciting topics and expert conversations in AI, Web3, crypto, and whatever else is hot and trending. Now, speaking of our experts, I have a very special guest on the show today. She is a creator and the host of Spatial Web AI podcast. A brilliant mind, I must say, who's been teaching me all about the spatial web. Why I wanted to have her on the show today to share her wealth of knowledge, not just with myself, but also with you guys as well. Denise, I am so excited you're here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mona. I am so happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Oh my God, me too. Guys, let me just give a quick background. Denise, I met Denise in one of her spaces, Twitter spaces, and she blew my mind with her spatial web knowledge. She is so well versed in a topic that I would say it's very intimidating for people to talk about, just because there's so much tech jargon that I feel like you have to bypass. But Denise, you just have this ability to break down the spatial web concept into I don't know, smaller digestible pieces. And to be honest, I'm going to admit that's exactly why I wanted to have you on this show, to break these concepts down for us today.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And honestly, I mean, if you look at the content that I'm producing right now, that's my main goal is education. So, it's really important to be able to take these complex subjects and, make them understandable. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, and we've talked about, my audience, our, mainstream audience, they do have a very basic knowledge of, crypto and Web3 and Metaverse. We talk a lot about some of these concepts and the features that follow. But spatial web is a new topic, even for me. And to be honest, you were the first expert who I actually started to understand what spatial web means. So before we dive in, though, will you give everyone a quick background about you and how you got into this?
Yeah. So a longtime friend of mine, Dan Mapes, he is the founder of Versus AI. One of the founders. And so, I've known Dan for years, and I knew when they were starting Versus, which was back in like 2016, 2017. So I've been watching this idea of what they've been building with the spatial web protocol, and then, the Versus technology and the AI and everything. I've, been seeing it unfold over the last 5-6 years. And it was about a year ago that, Dan and I were having a conversation, and he told me that it was going to be launching to the public, late this year. And that, they had just gone public on the Neo exchange at the time. And all these things were happening. And I was like, oh, okay, there's a transition here, so, that's when I realized, there would be a huge need for education. And so, yeah, I just dove into the technology and, did a ton of research on my own about the AI and everything else. And yeah, so I've just been cooking ever since.
Deep in. Yeah, you are neck deep, my friend. You really are. And I want to have Dan on the show as well, but I have to admit, I'm just getting my feet wet. Okay, don't tell him yet. But
Well, I actually just spoke with him, and I told him I was going to be on here today, and he said, "Let her know I'd be happy to do an interview." So
my God, he's like, well, how come I'm not a part of this? We should have invited him. But I honestly, this is me getting my feet wet. Just tell him that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really fascinating because I feel like we all imagine a world where digital information is really integrating into our physical surrounding, right? That world is the world of spatial web, and that world is now here. But how is it converging with our physical world, and how does it really work, and how will it transform into our day-to-day experiences is exactly why you're here today. And what you're going to break down for us. So maybe, Denise, we can start with kind of taking us back to the basics. Maybe let's call it the Spatial Web 101.
Yep.
Can you start us off, take us way back in a very simple, basic way, and talk to us about what is the spatial web and how is it really different from the traditional internet that we're using today?
Yeah. So, you nailed it. And, that's the easiest way to kind of answer the question of, how is it going to be, intermingled with our lives? And it's very simply, it's just the next evolution of the internet protocol, the same internet that we use every day when we're Googling and searching and doing all the things we do within the internet. The difference is, right now the World Wide Web is this, library of pages and websites and web domains. And, they're, all of the data is exchanging on these websites, on these web servers. So the data is exchanging under this centralized, umbrella of whoever owns that website, right? So,
Right.
that's how the World Wide Web works. That's the world we're in. And the protocol for that is the HTTP and the HTML, right? So what's changing is that protocol. That protocol is advancing to HSTP, Hyperspace Transaction Protocol, and HSML is the programming language, Hyperspace Modeling Language. And what that does is it takes us from websites into web spaces. 3D digital twin spaces. So everything in any space becomes a domain. It becomes, identifiable, locatable, permissionable, and then the programming language, the modeling language, what it does is it programs context about all those things in those spaces and their relationships to each other and the relationships of one space to another. So that's what the modeling language does, is it informs the parameters around 3D spaces. So what that does is really interesting. It gives us digital twin spaces. So now every single physical thing has a digital representation. So a physical space like my living room has a digital representation of that too. So that opens up to this entire new world of artificial intelligence that can then power all of those spaces and all of that data.
Which, by the way, that's my next question. I want to ask you, I want to bring AI, AR and VR into this, but I want to ask you this first. Why now? Is it because, just recently I did an interview about whether Web3 and AI can be friends, can make each other better. So I kind of want to ask that same question. Is this happening now because of Web3 and because of AI? And now we're in the process of building the spatial web. Why now?
Honestly, the main enabler is bandwidth increase, right? So I think this is the kind of technology that we wanted with the World Wide Web, but the bandwidth was too low. Speeds were too slow. Connectivity was a problem. Being able to transfer, data information was a problem when you're talking about 3D spaces versus, web pages. And if you think of the evolution of the internet, it started with, TCP/IP, where you had one computer just sending a text message to another computer, and it was just transferring text messages. And then HTTP, HTML came out, and now all of a sudden everybody could go to your website. It was like you could have these web pages, these domains to attract people to. And so all we're doing is just expanding that to spatial domains versus websites. And it comes along with a couple of really interesting things. With Web 2.0, security was an afterthought. So, then it was all passwords and all this stuff because, it was an afterthought. So then it became, how do we make this secure? And all the data exchanges under the endpoints. So then whatever centralized organization controls that domain, they get all the data that's exchanging. It's just a byproduct of it. It's going to be very different when the spatial web protocol is in the hands of the public and we're using it, because the way HSTP works is it makes it to where permissions are at every touch point. And so the data is exchanging within your own domain spaces, and you get to control what happens with that data. You get to control who can see it, who can't, how much of it can be shared. And, we're still going to be giving away our data in the future, but we'll be trading it for things. The value is ours. It's not just being given away for free, and we'll decide. And it's funny because, we'll have a situation where we may go to the doctor and we'll say, you can have access to this amount of information for this amount of time. You can set an expiration on it,
Right.
You have ultimate control over who can access your data. And the other aspect is this structure within the spatial web protocol. It enables zero knowledge proofs. So it enables this structure of complete protection of the data that's being shared, to where it doesn't have to be, sensitive information doesn't have to be revealed for it to be known within the AI within the system.
Which is, security is definitely a question that I'm going to bring up. And by the way, a couple of people in the audience, and maybe I should put a chat overlay here so you can see it as well. Somebody in the audience said fiber optics. When you were talking, he mentioned fiber optics and quantum computers. We're definitely, that's definitely the theme here, right? But there's also a theme of AR and VR, right? Now, the reason I asked you why now is because I feel like those virtual spaces are just now being built via Web3 and the metaverses that we're seeing being developed as well. Can you talk to us about augmented reality and virtual reality, and how at this point they're playing a role in the spatial web experience?
Yeah. So when I look at the spatial web protocol, and I look at the fact that this is now going to program digital twin spaces, this is the foundation layer that's been missing for us to really enter into this augmented experience of living that we've wanted, but the foundation hasn't been there. And so what's really interesting is what the spatial web protocol does is it creates this foundation layer that now all these Web3 technologies, all smart technologies, all XR technologies can now come on top of and be in one unified network space. So it provides a level of interoperability that has been missing. Right. And you can see in the Web3 sphere, there's all these projects, all these, companies that are trying to build bridges between blockchains, build bridges for interoperability. That's because this foundation layer has been missing, and you won't find it in Web 2. In the World Wide Web, it's impossible. In the spatial web, now we're all on this unified network of distributed intelligence because AI powers the network. So all these technologies, when you're talking about different metaverses, they're going to be able to be interoperable with each other, as well as us being able to jump in and out of like augmented experiences as we walk through our daily life. When you think of what Whole Foods, has tried to demonstrate in some of their stores, where you just walk in, start loading up your basket and walk out. You don't check out.
Which I said I'm not doing, Denise. I'm not doing it.
Well, that's the thing is, right now, those things are happening in Web 2.0. So there's security in experiences like that. Whereas in the spatial web, those kinds of experiences will be enabled seamlessly, but all of your data will be protected. You will be protected in those experiences. You're not just giving away it's not just,
So are you saying the spatial web is
our utmost?
So is the spatial web the security that Web3 needs and has been needing?
Yes.
Did spatial web needed to come first then?
Yeah, yeah. And so to back up a little bit on the origin story, what's really interesting is, Dan Mapes and Gabriel Rene, they're the two initial founders of Versus. And, Dan's previous experience to this, he had a technology R&D lab called Cyber Lab for like 25 years, and when Gabe was a lot younger, that's how they met. Gabe came to work at Cyber Lab, and Dan started Cyber Lab in the mid 80s. They would work on everything from government projects to entertainment for like the previous 10 years before starting Versus. It was all AR, VR, AI stuff. So when like 2016-ish, 2017, all of these emerging technologies just started to converge, and they're like, okay, see what's happening here, but this foundation needs to be there. They knew what they wanted to build on top of this architecture, but the protocol had to evolve. So that's what they had to do first. They built the protocol, and then they donated it to the public because nobody can own the internet, but it had to be there for what they wanted to do, So the IEEE, they donated it to the IEEE, which is one of the largest core standards bodies in the world. They develop core standards around everything like, Wi-Fi and Ethernet and all kinds of stuff like that. They deemed it a public imperative 3 years ago, which is their highest designation. So the core standards have been, being hammered out for the last 3 years, and they're almost finalized. And then Versus, what they're doing is they've built an operating system on top of it. So that's what's coming into the hands of the public. So we will have, access to all of this spatial web functionality through this operating system. And the operating system has two parts. For the general public, your interaction now with the internet is going to be through an intelligent agent called Gia, who is now everybody's personal assistant, and then there's an app store where anybody can build one of these intelligent agent apps. And the difference with these intelligent agents, these AI apps, is that you build an app in the Apple App Store. It's just a siloed piece of software like every other piece of software. Right? On Cosm, the operating system that Versus has built, these apps are all aware of each other, and they're aware of the network, to the extent of whatever's public, on the network, or whatever they have access to have been given permissions, and each intelligent agent is going to be permissioned differently according to whoever is programming it and what they're allowing, So when you talk about the level of interoperability for all of this technology to converge on a unified network, I mean,
that is just, it's so big and it's so fascinating. And that's why I want to ask you about security, because that's been one of the biggest concerns in Web3, and also ethics, regulations, and security are at the top of the list when it comes to working and having these apps and having these systems in our day-to-day. So my first question in that area would be, is the tech ready for all of this? And then tell us a little bit more about security, because at the end of the day, when you mentioned Amazon, the reason I don't want to do this is because I really don't know what you guys are doing with my data. Right. And I don't feel comfortable. And a lot of people say to me, well, you already give them everything through your phone. And I understand that. But there's just this certain feeling that I get to give my data to buy food. Right. So and that's a whole different conversation, Shab. I don't want to divert us, but let's go back to, is the tech ready for this? And what do we have to do to get there if not?
Yeah. So the protocol is where the security is baked in. So, and what I mean by that is, the hyperspace transaction protocol, it's informed by the programming language, which is the hyperspace modeling language. With that modeling language, every single person, place, or thing in any space is able to have context baked into it. And the context can be everything from identity to credentials to even things that will inform how the object or whatever it is transforming over time in that space, so things like temperature and pressure and even degrees of happiness, different things like that
Wow.
can all be measurable in digital or physical science, then it's programmable in this language. And so what happens then is that at every touch point, permissions can be baked into it. And then the other side of this is the HSML also enables us to take human law and make it programmable in a way that the AI that is interpreting these spaces can understand what those laws are, and then they can comply and abide and act accordingly. So, and they've
smart contract. Can we call that smart contracts?
So here's the thing, HSML, and I've said this before, HSML is going to be the smartest contract around.
Wow. I hope our Web3 folks are hearing this. By the way, I do want to encourage questions in the chat too. If you guys have any questions for Denise, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll put it on the screen. So you're saying that's how we're going to do smart contracts in the spatial web. This is fascinating.
And it's blockchain agnostic. So every blockchain will work within the network, right? So you can still have separate blockchains if you find that you want them or need them or whatever you want to do within that realm, you can do it. But what this does is it takes all of those separate siloed programs and applications and technologies, and it allows them to interact within this network in a seamless way. So yeah, ultimately HSML is the smartest contract around, but you can still have your other smart contracts that are working within it. I do think though, and this is just my personal feeling, I do think that the people will find there are some redundancies and some things that exist right now in practice won't be necessary.
Well, can these two merge then? Can the blockchain and the spatial web merge? And
yeah, it's a transaction protocol.
Wow. And speaking of that, Menja is asking us what computers will run the operating system.
So as far as my understanding is, it's compatible with every device, every computer. So they're making it to where it's mass compatibility. So that's as far as I know. I don't have that information yet, but it's my understanding that, through COSM, you're going to be able to access the spatial web, whether you're on your phone, whether you're on a computer, whether you're on a headset, whatever it is.
I want to humanize this a little bit more for our mainstream audience. Why do we even need the spatial web in our day-to-day? And what limitations for an average person is this addressing? And why would we want to inject digital information into our physical space?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of things here. One of the biggest things the spatial web does is it solves three of the major problems that we have in Web 2 right now, which is tracking, hacking, and faking. So all of those will
say
go
that
away.
Again. Tracking, hacking, and faking. Yes, yes, and yes.
Surveillance capitalism is not, that goes away. Yeah. And then because the power then becomes yours, self-sovereign identity and zero knowledge proofs. And then faking, right now you have all this AI that's being implemented in this unsecured Web 2 environment. And so, gosh, you have people who are just being scammed and, all kinds of things because it's so easy to do deep fakes. And there's nothing to tell you whether it's real or not, right? So there will still be deep fake, people faking in the spatial web, but it'll be really clear if it's from that person or not. So then it becomes like a parody, like SNL, and it's entertainment. You know what I mean?
So it's an open source. So we're talking about an open source, just like the blockchain, and a decentralized space.
Yeah, it's just going to be very, it's going to be very clear, if any content that is out there, where it's originating from, if it's the actual person, like if it's a celebrity or if it's somebody who did a parody of a celebrity, that kind of thing. And then the hacking side of it as well, and this is getting a little technical for me, as far as explaining how that works, but and this will lead me into the other side of why people are going to really be,
Wanting,
excited about
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
The AI that is enabled within the spatial web architecture, it's totally different than machine learning AI. So right now we've seen, chat GPTs and, all of these really fun mid journeys. Those are all great at generating content. They're pattern matching machines. You feed it tons of big data so that it'll get better at matching patterns, pattern recognition for the outputs. That's awesome for content generation, but you can't take a model like that and have it run mission critical operations like a hospital or an airport or anything like that, because
Which that's called inference, right? That's the inference AI.
yes. So the spatial web enables something called active inference AI, and it's based on the free energy principle. And both of those are scientific theories that Dr. Carl Friston has been working on for more than 10 years. And if you don't know who Carl Friston is, he's the most cited neuroscientist in the world. And he's really celebrated for all of his work in human brain mapping and, the physics of brain theory, and which is what the active inference and the free energy principle fall under. Now, the difference with active inference AI and why the spatial web, that coupled with the spatial web, is going to give us this AI, this distributed network of intelligence, is that within the spatial web, you have all the smart technologies, all of the digital twin spaces, but you also have IoT, the Internet of Everything, sensors, right? So you have the IoT sensors, you have cameras, microphones, any of these are devices, all of these things that can, be used to sense the world around us. As humans, when we think and we learn, we are taking in all the sensory information from our environment, and we're measuring it against what we know to be true, what we've learned previously. And that's helping us to make our decisions and make predictions about what might happen next, what we might expect. And it's just this feedback loop that constantly helps us to learn and understand our environment for better sense making and decision making. That's how this AI works. So it takes in information through IoT sensors and cameras and all kinds of things. And then it's also taking all of the context that's programmed into the spaces and the interrelationships of everything. And it's taking all of that together, and it's using this cybernetic feedback loop to be able to make accurate predictions and decisions and actually enable it to act in the environment.
So you're saying to me that as someday I'm going to be having this conversation with you, and I'm going to have this AI bubble pop right here and just take in everything that you're saying and tell me exactly what to ask you and just every topic that I need to go next, and just dissect all this information for us. Got it. This is so scary, but I love it.
Well,
And that's
it's interesting. So I'll give you another example of just how, the average person using cause and why people are going to want to evolve, the internet. And everything's backward compatible. Like when we went to the World Wide Web, we didn't lose email, like all of that is still there. All this does is expand what our capabilities are in the same network now, right?
Right.
So what's interesting is right now, if you want to search something, or like say I'm trying to book travel, right? Um, I have to go search for flights on a website, and, try to, figure it all out myself. What times do I want to go? What's the most and least I want to pay? All of that. And you're sitting there just working through it. And now I'm done with that. Now let me go do the same thing with a hotel room,
Yeah,
all of
right.
that, right? It's like going from one siloed application to the next. And some of these APIs try to make it seem like it's this seamless, but that's just passing you off from one thing to the next, right?
Right.
On Cosm, instead of Googling, you're going to be able to talk, and it's going to be to the intelligent agent interface, which is Gia, right? So I'll be able to say, hey, Gia, I need to go to Copenhagen to speak at an event. So, these are the dates of the event. This is how much time I'm willing to use for travel. Find me the best deal, and I need a place to stay, whatever. Gia has access to all of the applications, from flights to, the hotels, to all the hotel deals, knows all of my flight information, my frequent flyer stuff, my travel ID, all of that kind of stuff. So Gia can literally go book my flight, book my hotel, do all of this just seamlessly and do it for me.
So Alexa is going to be Gia, correct?
Yeah, with a lot more power.
With a lot more power. So then I do want to ask you, how does this change how we do entertainment, how we do education, how we do healthcare? Give us some examples, some real scenario examples of how these industries will change with that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I feel like education, every single person is going to have this AI personal assistant, right? So, children will be able to have access to PhD level education just because they have access to this intelligence. And then when you're talking about just the digital twin aspect of basically the planet, it's funny, Dan Mapes, founder of Versus, he describes the spatial web that's powered by this active inference AI as a nervous system for the planet. And, think about having a digital twin that represents the planet, and then you can zoom right into it to any spot you want and gain all the information you want about any location, anything about it, the people, the history, the this, the that. And these digital twin spaces also allow simulation then, right? So then we can actually make real-time projections of what might happen with, think of climate change, think of all of these things. We can actually have proof of how things unfold. Okay, say we make this change, this tweak. Oh, look, it heals the planet. It does this. So, right now we have people who are really smart scientists who are saying we need to do this because we want to be the outcome. If we don't, it's this. And you have all these people going, well, I don't think it's that, and it's going to be irrefutable when we're able to actually model it out,
Yeah, it's interesting because I, in addition to doing deep dive, I also do technology news. I'm starting to do more technology news, and I just wrote 5 stories today, and 4 out of 5 were AI related, of course, and it was about Google, Zoom. And there were 3 Google stories and 1 Zoom story, and they're all integrating AI. And first and foremost, summaries, right? You can now summarize your entire life and every platform. And the other one was Amazon. Amazon is summarizing their reviews. Google is summarizing anything you now hover on in Google search will give you a summary of that word or a summary of that topic or concept. Zoom is now giving you a summary of your conversation, which became very controversial. And there was a whole ruckus last week on this. But all of this to say that it seems like these technology companies are realizing that if they don't get on this, this is moving so fast that they're going to get left behind. So when you're
Right.
talking about Gia and Alexa and how do you see these companies keeping up, and who do you see benefiting most by integrating the spatial web into their current and existing model?
Well, so the reality is that if you have a website, if you have an app, you're going to want to evolve those into the spatial web protocol so that you are now able to take your business and enable it with the interoperability and the you know the crazy amount of insights and capabilities that are going to come from this AI and being, in this, distributed network of intelligent agents. So, and it's funny because there will be people who are like, well, I don't really need to do that. Just like
Mhm.
when the World Wide Web came out, you had a lot of people going, I don't need a website. And then, a little while
Exactly.
later, yes, I
Yes.
need to, because if I want to be seen by Google, I need a website, So it's going to be
Yes.
the same type of a thing. You're going to want to be in this space because number one, you're going to want the AI to recognize you. And number
Hmm.
two, you're going to want that interoperability with all of the other apps and things that are there too, because you're going to want to give that extended amount of function and
Right.
capabilities to your customers
Right.
for their experience, because it's going to completely change the experience of our lives.
It's funny
And
you
when
say
you're
that because, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just
Didn't
going to
mean to
say, when
interrupt.
you're talking about AR and VR and stuff like that, this is the foundation for all these other technologies that we've been trying to use, but we've been trying to use them in Web 2. Web
Yeah.
3.0 is where it's going to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm putting Juan's comment here. This will change our shopping experience from retail, fashion, and even real estate, which is, yes, absolutely, it will. And I will go as far as saying Forbes a few weeks ago came out with an article saying, just like you said, every website, I think it was in the 90s, every business realized that having a website wasn't a thing that they had to, it was a necessity. They had to have a website. And they were saying by 2040, was it 2040? No, it was 20. No, it was way before that. I'm sorry. Don't quote me on this, guys. I apologize. I think it was 2030. Every website and every business has to have a representation, a digital representation of their business. So, for example, Juan is saying real estate here, where I wanted to ask you for some tangible examples of how, for example, healthcare would change. I would assume that a doctor's office would have to have a digital representation of their facility, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just think about medicine itself, right? When our bodies have a digital representation of them, and all of the things that are unique to us and our health experience and what's going on, and being able to actually model, disease and things like that in a way. It's interesting all the way from such a closely knit inner working of people to hospitals themselves and the way hospitals run. One
Mhm.
of the interesting things is one of the pilot projects that Versus has been working on for the last 3 years has been with the European Union. And it's a drone project called Flying Forward 2020. And that's the proof of concept where they've proven you can take, human law and through HSML, make it into a programmable, understandable language by the AI that the AI can comply with and adjust to in real time. So when you're talking about drone delivery, and they've done it with delivering medicine to hospitals or perimeter security, all kinds of stuff like that. When you're talking about airspace laws and you're talking about crossing country borders and the laws change, rules change, to be able to have the AI understand and abide within the law space, and then change on a dime the minute the laws change in real time, and adjust to variables, like when a drone is flying, there's
Mhm.
things that might
Yeah.
happen. Something might come
Yeah.
in front
Yeah.
of it. That's what happens in real life. And when you're talking about autonomous vehicles being able to drive and avoid obstacles, understand what the obstacles are, one of the things that Gabriel Rene, an example that he had given once, and this was really interesting because this will give you an idea of the difference between what this technology is versus what the machine learning does for autonomous vehicles. So if you have like like a Tesla, and it knows, the AI knows what a stop sign is, and it knows, okay, pattern, there's a stop sign,
Mhm.
I know to stop. Well, what if there's a stop sign in the back of a pickup truck and it's moving? The AI doesn't know what to do with that. And you see
Right.
these you see these autonomous vehicles in San Francisco, and I've seen a bunch of these videos where like they're just stopped in the middle of the road,
Me too. I've seen those.
all stopped around them, and
Yeah.
nobody can do anything. So
Yeah, and so that's, that brings up a question that I hear constantly in Twitter Spaces right now, and the question has been, is AI taking away jobs? And the truth is, the way you're explaining it right now is, we're going to need human to write these laws, correct?
yeah, yeah. And when you're talking about one of the biggest things right now, one of the biggest questions is AI governance, right?
Mhm.
And there's been a huge call for, how do we regulate this? Because obviously we're logical. We understand you're building autonomous vehicles. The thing is they eventually become autonomous.
Right.
So, but all of these AI, like AI, the way that active inference AI is you can think of it like a child, right? When a baby is born, it starts to learn about the world around it. First, it's the mother, and then it
Mhm.
starts to, understand other things, voices, different things. And then as it grows, it starts to understand, oh, I dropped that and it fell, and it starts to understand the physics around it. And as we grow into adults, we start to learn expertise about certain things.
Mhm.
All of our intelligence comes from our frame of reference that we grew into, right? So
Absolutely.
it's going to be the same thing within the spatial web. And that's one of the unique things about the protocol when you're talking about ethics, is that it's designed to preserve those frames of reference, those individual beliefs, those individual intelligences. That's what makes collective intelligence so valuable. It's not that everything is a blueprint, a blueprint copy from one, intelligence to another. It's all the different frames of reference that come together that enable this, growth of knowledge. So the way,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you who, because I think it was 2 weeks ago, White House put up a press release on their website asking these tech giants to step forward and help with AI regulation. So they all came forward. It was Amazon, Google, all the tech giants, and they said, we're going to help write the rules. But then, like, I had to take a second and ask myself, wait a second, do we want the people that are building AI write the rules for it? So who is qualified to do that? Is it these tech giants that are building AI?
So here's one of the biggest problems with AI governance right now, when you're talking about these machine learning models, is that they're known to be black boxes, right? The actual processing of the information is obscured. It's
Hmm.
unknowable. So we know the data we're training it on, and
Right.
then we know the parameters and the weights and everything that we're setting up to try to steer it into better outputs, you know, but all of the processing we can't touch. We don't know, we can't see, we can only see the output, right? So they're not auditable, they're unknowable, they're uncontrollable. And if they start going down a bad path of outputs, you can't do anything about it except start over,
Hmm. Hmm.
with a whole new training data set. So even Sam Altman, when he was before the EU,
Yeah.
yeah, he basically said, look, we want to comply, because a lot of the governance is calling for explainability then, and holding the companies accountable. And he literally said, we want to comply, we'll try to comply, but there's just technical difficulties that are going to prevent us from doing what you're asking. And if that's the case, we may have to pull out of Europe, because you can't do anything about that. Now, what's really interesting about active inference AI is it is completely explainable. It can self-report on how it's arriving at its decisions, and you can program in laws and guidance that it can understand and then abide by. So it's completely it has all the makings for autonomy. You've got the self-optimization, self-organization, self-evolution capabilities, but it's also completely programmable, auditable, and therefore it can actually scale in tandem with human governance. So these other models are, my opinion is in this future with the spatial web, these are tools that will fold into the spatial web just like every other technology. And through that, they'll gain the protections of the actual network programming itself,
Yeah, and Sam Altman had trouble himself in a lot of countries trying to get the world coin passed, through the laws of some of these countries, because Kenya was asking him, hey, how do we know what data you're really extracting when our people don't have the knowledge, right? And that's the question I want to ask you, knowledge. And the truth is, the reason we have these conversations and we have these spaces, because what we're trying to do is really educate the people to understand this next iteration of internet that is unfolding right before our eyes. We want to educate them first, because if we don't educate, it is very intimidating, and it's very scary for people to get their eyeballs scanned and their palms scanned. And next thing you know, I wrote a story today that the sound of your keystrokes is feeding data to AI. So you could just be typing and AI is picking up what passwords you're putting in. This is all very intimidating. So I want to ask you, and as time goes by so fast here too, how should people that really don't know much about this stuff get their feet wet? If I'm a business owner and I'm listening to this conversation, and I have a doctor's office, or I'm in healthcare, or I'm in hospitality, or whatever my business may be, how do I get my feet wet in the spatial web and take advantage of it, but still know that I'm going to be safe sharing my data?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, that's one of my goals, is just to really educate people so that they are ready, and they understand what's coming, and how to prepare for it. So you can always go to my blog, which is deniseholt.us. And I also have my podcast information. Everything's on there, so you'll see a lot of articles, my podcast, even the articles I write. I always do an audio read of it and put it on my YouTube channel and this podcast, so that you can listen while you're driving or whatever.
And I'll put that information in the comments for everyone as well, Denise.
And then check out the spatialwebfoundation.org. They're the organization that is working with the IEEE, with the core standards that are being developed and the protocol. And then you can check out verses.ai and you can see what's coming. And as far as preparation, Verses is launching COSM in a matter of months to the public. So, this is something that you'll have your hands on pretty quickly. End of this year, early next year is when it's going to be in the hands of the public. So it's definitely worth learning about now.
Yes, it is. And we're going to continue to have these spaces and we can educate, the mainstream audience and folks on some of these exciting concepts. But as we start to close here, and you guys in the audience, if you want to ask any questions before we start to close, do write your questions and I'll put it on the screen for Denise to answer. Denise, what are you excited about when it comes to spatial web, and what should the mainstream audience be excited about?
Oh, there's a lot to be excited about. And, to me, I've always been the tech geek girl at heart. And so,
Same.
I feel lucky to be living in the time that we're living in right now, because it's really the time of the most technological discovery ever for mankind. We're about to extend human lifespan, incredibly. We've got all this technology. I feel like what the spatial web is going to do is really usher in this kind of realm of abundance. And, I know that there's this transition period that might be, painful. Like I'm not discounting that, in this going from this idea of losing jobs into this space of finding different ways to find meaning as humans and whatnot. But, I kind of have this utopian outlook of it, in the sense of, like, I feel like when we're not scratching and clawing for survival, we're going to be able to look outward to the community and actually engage more with each other, and have better quality of life and everything else. So I see that as the ultimate outcome, which is really exciting to me.
It is, and it's very borderless, and that's how I understood Web3 as well, and especially with the metaverse and breaking boundaries through bringing all of us closer, where we can be sharing all of our information with each other and be right there with each other, and getting rid of these borders is what's exciting for me. But one last question I want to ask you: where would you say the spatial web is right now? What's next, and what are some of the maybe frictions that it still needs to mitigate? And then what are we looking forward to?
Well, so like I said, Versus is launching their technology to the public very soon. So we have that to look forward to. Right now, the finishing touches are being put on the core standards around the protocol, and I'm a voting member in the Spatial Web Protocol Working Group with the IEEE. So I see what's been happening, and how this is evolving, and the level of integrity, and just the people that are involved are really taking the approach of inclusion, and long vision for making sure that what's being developed is going to benefit us as humans, as a civilization, and so I think there's so many good things that in everything that I've seen about the development of this. I really feel like once we're in this space and we're not really, dealing with all of the things that we currently deal with the World Wide Web,
Yes.
I feel like
Yes.
a lot of the fears and a lot of the things that people, have around AI, it's because of this unsecured environment. So I feel like
Yeah.
once people see how it evolves, and how security is first and foremost, privacy, all of that stuff, people are going to feel a lot better about this evolving, and where it's going to go. So, I don't know. I think it's going to happen faster than people think, and once the spatial web gets in the hands of the public, next year I see as a year of just people kind of ramping up, and kind of realizing what they can do now, and I think by the next year, like, life is going to look very different for all of us.
And also, as we start to see more companies like Amazon, Google, start to pick up some of these concepts and incorporate it into how we interact with them, because I think people put their trust in these companies. If Amazon is doing it, it must be safe. It's if Google is doing it, it must be safe. And just like digital currency, right? It was that there's this just bad taste in everyone's mouth, but PayPal just came out with PayPal USD, and now everybody's fine with PayPal USD, right? Why is it? Because PayPal adopted it. So I think adoption from one of the, most of these tech giants, when they adopt it, it will make it a little bit more palatable and easier for us normies to adopt as well, don't you think?
I don't know. And the reason why I say that is because I think just like with, when the general public got their hands on Chat GPT, it was like, oh, I have the power of this in my hands now, and then when like when Meta released the foundation model on open source, then all of a sudden you had all of these, people going, oh, I could build my own AIs now, and so, I think that just COSM alone with this AI app store, and that anybody can jump on and build, an AI powered app within the new network. I think that we're just going to see an explosion of innovation. And I think that those are going to be the things that really lure people into going, there's so much power here. And, so, and, my thinking too is, I don't know, these other tech giants, they might be trying so hard to hold on to their control in Web 2.0 that they might be the last ones to figure it out. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to read. Alexander says people will always be scared of something they don't understand, but once big brands adopt it, they believe it and try to research more, that's what we were talking about. I mean, I feel like that's true too. And it's funny because earlier we were talking about how you're constantly seeing these different apps coming up with AI summaries. I work a lot with Vimeo, which is a video platform. And you can see that these platforms are realizing, if I don't offer summaries, everyone is going to go to another AI platform, right?
Yeah.
Even with YouTube.
So just real quick, because I know that we're probably short on time, but to that point, one of the things that's really interesting is right now, you're reading all this stuff of, if you're not jumping on the AI bandwagon and putting that in your skill set, you're already behind, and but yet you have corporations who are sitting there telling their employees, do not use Chat GPT at work. Do not, because what it's doing is it's opening up their proprietary data to the third party of OpenAI, because we're talking about the World Wide Web. Mm-hmm. And so one of the interesting things with the active inference AI and the spatial web is it can take any amount of data, make it smart, put guardrails around it. So you can now have all these enterprises that can incorporate it in, guardrail their proprietary information, but still have the same, networking of the AI and building AIs that are bringing all of their disparate data sets together for insights and things that were never possible inside their corporations. And it'll be like that. So yeah,
Denise, Netflix is offering a $900,000 job for anyone who can help them with AI. What do you guys mean there's no jobs?
Yeah, it's interesting. An interesting world, but it's going fast too. It's
absolutely
very fast.
Absolutely. And I think everyone at this point is trying to hop on the wave, and otherwise you get left behind. So teach yourself. It's one of those spaces I say, each one teach one. So you have to teach each other and yourself. But yes, we are running out of time. Denise, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. Your wealth of knowledge and insight is just fascinating, and I can just sit here and listen to you and learn. It's like I'm front row college, back in college, listening to my professor. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insight with us. And I hope you can always come back and give us more updates.
Oh, I'm already looking forward to the next conversation with you, Mona. And thank you so much
I would
for
love
having me.
to.
This has been a thrill. Thank you so much.
Of course. And will you tell everyone one more time where they can find more about you, the podcast, and also Versa as well?
Yeah, so my blog, deniseholt.us, and my articles, podcasts, everything's there. My podcast can be found on YouTube, but every other podcast player too. Versus.ai, that's where you can learn about Cosm and Gia. And if you look at their press releases, all the research that's going on with the AI, it seems like they're releasing a new press release every day of just some breakthrough. Yeah. So that's a great resource to keep up to speed with what's happening. And then the Spatial Web Foundation.org.
Yep. Absolutely. Or just come into Denise's spaces where I learned up close and personal as well.
Yeah, on Twitter, X, I used to call them Twitter Tuesdays. Now they're just Tuesdays, but it's Tuesdays at 5 p.m. We do a space.
Yes, absolutely. And I promise to have Denise back again for sure. Denise, thank you so much. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. We'll be back again next week with more hot topics in technology. Until then, I'm your host, Mona. Stay positive.
Thank you.